Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Whenever people do that, I always begin by saying, I wish we could end now. And then I could tell my wife, got a standing ovation. That doesn't always happen when it's over. Really, really nice to be here. And after Mark finished, I thought to myself, we should really go straight into the Q&A. Well done, Mark. Beautifully done. And, philosophy comes at three levels. It comes at a foundational level of argument. It comes as an illustration level of the story. And it comes at the application level of how it all applies around the kitchen table and in life. And what you heard was how best to apply it at the kitchen table level in life, but just enough of that foundation given why the argument holds and how the story is lived out day to day in business and in individual lives. We've been traveling a lot. I began some days ago, started in Dallas, Texas, and went from there to Houston, from Houston to Dunedin, and that we had a few birthdays along the way on that one. From Dunedin, we have just come here for tonight. We leave at the crack of dawn for Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia, and then on from there to Thailand, and then to India, and then to Seoul, Korea, but we get home about the 18th of March. So the body takes a beating, and you show up, whether in the body or out of the body, you cannot tell, but you're there. And my voice took a beating, but it's gradually recovering. That Manuka honey is extraordinary. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's extraordinary both for the throat and for the wallet. Especially if you believe everything you say about the numbers out there. But it's great to have had that. My wife asked me yesterday, how are you doing? I said, I don't know whether it's honey or what, but I'm doing better. And the voice is regaining. So thank you. I want to thank Pastor Martin for opening this church up to us. Very kind of you, sir. Very gracious of you to do it. And also to Rodney for working hard behind the scenes. I don't know how long ago all of this began. I'm just told where to go, and I show up. And the plane stops, so you get off. I was told that this is where we were to be. But New Zealand's been one of my favorite countries. Wonderful, wonderful to come here, so beautiful. Some of my dearest friends on earth are right from here in Auckland. In fact, one of them is here tonight. I've known him for about 50 years now, and it's just wonderful to look forward to a cup of coffee at the end of the evening. We knew him well as a family friend. Bruce Robinson is here, just a wonderful dear buddy of mine. You can lead a very busy life, and what really matters at the sunset years are the loves and the friendships and the family that you have treasured and enjoyed. So it's wonderful to be here, albeit for a few short hours. And to add more beauty to it all, the two cricket teams are staying in the same hotel we are. So that took a lot of sacrifice for me to come. I saw some of the Indian cricketers in there. I don't know what they were doing, probably scouting or whatever. I wanted to go and give them a few tips, but they didn't take it. The question before us, the whole question of ethics. So let me start off with a funny story. You may have heard me tell it. This Indian guy is in a plane, and he's sitting next to Einstein. Now you know the imagination is running riot. So he looks at Einstein, and Einstein says to him, we've got a long journey. It's going to be a long flight. Why don't we play a game as we go? So the man says to Einstein, what's the game you want to play? He says, let's play a question of questions. I'll ask you a question, and if you can't answer it, you pay me $50. The other guy said, you're Einstein. He said, yeah, but it's okay. We'll level the playing field. Then you ask me a question. If I can't answer it, I'll pay you $500. So if you can't answer it, you pay me $50. If I can't answer it, I'll pay you $500. The guy said, for an Indian, that's very appealing. He said, okay, we'll do it. So he goes to town. So he told Einstein, you go first, since you proposed it. So Einstein said, I'll make it simple. How far is the moon from the earth? And the Indian, most Indians are engineers. So he said, He said, you know what, I know the answer, but I don't know if I can give it exactly the way you're looking for it, so here's $50. Paid him 50. Einstein said, your question. He said, Mr. Einstein, what walks up the mountain with 3 legs and comes down with 4 legs? Einstein said, what? So what goes up the mountain with 3 legs and comes down with 4 legs? So Einstein started to think of his studies in entomology and all that stuff, and dipped into his pocket and gave him $500. So I looked at the Indian and said, before I ask you my next question, what does go up the mountain with 3 legs and come down with 4 legs? And the Indian gave him $50. I was in, the moral of the story is don't get into a question time with an Indian. You'll never get out of it. Some years ago, I just left somewhere in the Orient and arrived in Newark, New Jersey. It was a long 14 and a half hour flight. You look like a passport picture when you get off that kind of a flight. So I went to the gate and I looked at the marquee. It pointed to a different flight. So I said to the lady sitting at the corner, is this flight going where the marquee says it's going, or is it going to Atlanta, where I want to go? She said it's going to Atlanta. I said, oh, that's good. So I turned around to go and get myself a cup of coffee, and I heard the patter of feet behind me. And she tapped me on the shoulder, the same lady. She said, excuse me, are you Ravi Zacharias? I said, I'm afraid so. Yes, I'm Ravi Zacharias. She said, that's amazing. That is so amazing. I didn't know you had questions also. I promise you, I didn't make this up. It sounds like something you would make up, you know. Questions. We're all haunted by questions. Right from the time we toddle around with the baggage around us, we're asking why, who, what, when, where. Even when we don't understand the clock, we say, when are you coming back? We understand very little about so many things, and we actually think we know a lot about everything. Before my father passed away, and it's a long story, my dad and I didn't have a good relationship in my youth, and he had every reason to be very angry with me many of the times. But before he died, he asked me to take him to the hospital. He had a premonition that he was not going to come through that surgery. And I lived 75 miles away in Niagara Falls, Ontario. My dad was in Toronto. And all of my brothers and sisters were in Toronto, 10 to 15 minutes away from him. But he phoned me to ask me if I'd come and take him. I said, Dad, it'll take me at least an hour and a half if I leave right now. You better get to the hospital right away. Call Ajit, he'll take you, my older brother. He said, no, I want you to come. So I drove. And as I was driving him to the hospital, I realized why he'd asked me for that. And one of the main things he wanted to say to me was to apologize for the hard years in my youth, where he'd roughed me up pretty bad. But then the fascinating thing about what he said to me was, he said, you know, son, I always thought I knew so much. Always thought I knew so much. And when I looked at your life, I thought you were going to be a total disaster. I was just trying to shame you into reality. I didn't see what your Heavenly Father saw. And I just want to say I'm sorry. We think we're all mistakes. You do it, I do it. We think we know so much. And I want to talk to you tonight about one of the most important questions, but I'm going to flip the response after I raise the question in order to deal with this issue of ethics, meaning and purpose. C.S. Lewis said when a ship goes on to the high seas, it has to answer 3 questions. Number 1, how to keep from sinking. Number 2, how to keep from bumping into other ships. The first issue deals with personal ethics. The second deals with social ethics. How to keep from sinking, how to keep from bumping into other ships. He said, but then comes the most important question. Why is it out there in the first place? Why is the ship on the high seas in the first place? He said, that is essential ethics. That gives you the essence from which you derive the personal and the social ethics. And the truth of the matter is, when you go across the history of philosophical thought, whether you move from rationalism to empiricism to existentialism, to postmodernism, many of those isms made one fundamental blunder. In taking the finger of one discipline, they thought they were grabbing the fist of reality. In taking the finger of one discipline, they thought they were grabbing the finger of reality. Yes, there is a place for rationalism, meaning reason has a supremacy in dialogical discourse. Yes, there is a place for empiricism. You walk into the lab and you measure what happens when A is joined to B. The scientist does that all the time. But please take note. The scientist may know what happens when you put A and B together, but there's nothing in science that gives him the imperative as to why he should tell us the truth. That is not from physics. That is metaphysics, or dare I suggest, those are transcendent spiritual realities which make a reference to an objective moral framework that must superintend over everything that we do, whether it's in the lab or outside of the lab. So yes, there was a place for empiricism. Existentialism, will, meaning, yes, a place for that. And then you come to postmodernism, where community became so important. But somewhere between the middle of the 19th century and the end of the 19th century, a philosophy was taking hold that was popularized by the German philosopher Nietzsche, who popularized the phrase, God is dead. Now, ironically, Nietzsche was the son of a pastor, and both of his grandfathers were in the ministry, but he lost his faith in God. And the ironic thing about him is he did say this: if what I'm saying is true about the death of God, two things are going to happen in the 20th century, the next century. Number one, a universal madness will break out. And number two, the 20th century will become the bloodiest century in history. He was right on both counts. In a sense, he embodied the first. The last 13 years of his life, he himself was moving between sanity and insanity as his mother sat by his bedside watching this brilliant mind waste away. And in the 20th century, we killed more people than the previous 19 centuries put together in warfare. Turned out to be right. But this is how he said it. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours? And he ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, I'm looking for God, I'm looking for God. As many of those who did not believe in God were standing together there, he excited considerable laughter. Have you lost him then, said one. Did he lose his way like a child, said another. Is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage or emigrated? Thus they shouted and laughed him to scorn. But the madman sprang into their midst and pierced them with his lances. Where is God? He cried. I shall tell you, we've killed him, you and I. We are all his murderers. But how did we do this? How were we able to drink up the sea? Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What did we do when we unchained this earth from its sun? Notice the series of metaphors and the questions here now. Whither are we moving now? Away from all suns? Are we not perpetually falling backwards and forwards and sidewards in all directions? Is there any up or down left? Are we not straying through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not suddenly become colder? Is not more and more night coming on us all the time? Must not lanterns now have to be lit in the morning hours? Do we not hear anything yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we not smell anything yet of God's decomposition? God's decomposed too, you know, and he's dead. He remains dead, and we killed him. Now, how shall we, the murderer of all murderers, compose ourselves? That which was holiest and mightiest of all that the world yet possessed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood from us? With what water can we purify ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games will we need to invent? Is not this the greatest of deeds, too great for us? Must we now not ourselves have to become God, simply to seem worthy of what we've done? There's never been a greater deed, you know, and whoever shall be born after us for the sake of this deed will be part of a higher history than all history hitherto. But this tremendous act is still on its way, still traveling, and has not yet reached the ears of men. Lightning and thunder require time. The light of the stars require time. Deeds require time, even after they are done. It has been related further that on the same day that this madman entered diverse churches and there sang a requiem, Aeternam Deo, let out and quieted, he said to have retorted each time, what are these churches now if they are not the tombs and sepulchres of God? God is dead. We killed him. You know what I like about Nietzsche? He's not just poignant. There is a vulnerability in what he is saying. Who gave us a sponge to wipe away the horizon? Is there any up or down left? Have you noticed in politics it's only right and left? There's never an up and a down? Oh, he's a right-winger. He's a left-winger. We never ever talk about an up and a down, and as Mark has well said, because that would be considered almost lunatic, and yet what we've really done is demonstrated the lunacy of how we live without an up and a down, without a transcendent moral point of reference. And so 4 things happen. I will mention the first 2 quickly, and then briefly, a little more than briefly, and the last 2 I will keep very brief. The first is this: if God is dead, what will become the point of reference for moral reasoning? Where do we turn to? I know philosophers have tried to. There was one guy in Dunedin who said he could actually come up with a superior moral immorality with secularism. How ludicrous. Why? How does he know it's superior? If there's no point of reference, how is it superior? It's his point of self-referencing maxims. That's all it is, platitudes. Why is my ethic any better than your ethic? What audacity for me to say that I have a superior ethic to yours. Try telling that to some people who are willing to lop your head off if you actually believe that. The fact of the matter is, philosophers have struggled and struggled with this issue, and I want to read just 1 or 2 statements from staunch atheistic philosophers. Here's Kai Nielsen, the prolific atheist from the University of Calgary in Alberta. Here's what he says: we have not been able to show that reason actually requires a moral point of view. Or that really rational persons, unhoodwinked by myth or ideology, need not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I have painted for you is not a pleasant one. Reflection on this depresses me deeply. Pure practical reason, even with a good knowledge of the facts, will not take you to morality. Bertrand Russell says this: you know what? I somehow cannot live as though ethical values were simply a matter of my personal taste. And so I just say to you, I find my own views incredible. I do not know the solution. Prolific atheistic philosopher Richard Rorty: if moral imperatives are not commanded by God's will, and if they are not in some sense absolute, then what ought to be is a matter simply of what men and women decide should be for themselves. There is no other source of judgment. These are atheistic philosophers. This depresses me, says Kai Nielsen. There is no rationally compelling reason for me to be moral. And you know what? That was the very rationale behind the Hitlerian onslaught in the Third Reich. He took the writings of Nietzsche, Adolf Hitler did, and personally presented Nietzsche's writings to Stalin and Mussolini. What did Stalin do? He was a seminary student preparing for the ministry. I heard these stories personally from the mouth of Malcolm Muggeridge when we spent an afternoon together. Followed it up and footnoted it. Paul Johnson, the historian, also tells these 2 major stories. Number 1 is this. You know, he gave up his belief in God. In fact, he was such a threat to what potentially could happen with his own demagoguery that even Lenin became fearful of where Stalin was going to take the country. He was not a big guy. Stalin was not even his real name. It was a nickname, being a man of steel. 2 illustrations I want to give to you that I shared at the Center for Geopolitical Strategy in Moscow as the faculty members were in pin-drop silence as I gave it to them. All along, they'd been fighting me with their atheistic worldview. So I said, I want to tell you 2 stories. One of them was on site. Told one of them in the whole setting, one of them in the private setting. I had to be very careful how we narrated this. One was this. A diplomat came to Stalin one day and said to him, how do you expect your people to follow you while you're torturing them like this? Stalin didn't answer her. He asked for a live chicken to be brought to him. They brought him a live chicken. He clutched it and started to defeather the bird. And it tried to break free. He wouldn't let it go till he had completely denuded it. Then he took that denuded body of the chicken and put it down, picked up a piece of bread and walked away about 5 paces. And the chicken hobbled over towards him and nuzzled between his trouser legs. He bent down with the bread in his hand and started to peck away at the bread. He said, do you have your answer, ma'am? I've tortured this chicken. It'll follow me for food the rest of its life. People are like that chicken. You torture them and they will follow you for food the rest of their lives. And he killed 15 million of them. Stalin told me he personally interviewed Svetlana. Muggeridge told me that when Stalin was dying, his daughter, Svetlana, was by the bedside and told Muggeridge this story, and in a BBC narrative, he told it. So she's standing by her father's bedside, and he's hallucinating, saying wolves were coming to attack him. But the last physical act he did was to half sit up in bed, clench his fist to the heavens one more time, put his head back on the pillow, and he was gone. The last physical energy he expended with a clenched fist against God. He took the logical outworking of what Nietzsche had said and treated man as nothing more than mere randomly produced by time plus matter plus chance. See, you may be a moral person, and I'm not saying atheists are not moral people. That's not my point at all. I'm just saying there is no rationally compelling reason in a pluralistic society for anyone's ethic to be superior to anybody else's ethics. They're all a whim of society and social constructs and culture. The moral reasoning fails. Where do we get our ethics from? Number one, you fail in finding an absolute point of reference for a moral law. Number two, you fail in your struggle, a very important struggle for meaning. Life hungers for meaning. I can tell you this after visiting scores of campuses after 40 years of an itinerant. We really don't hear a new question. My Muggeridge used to say, all new news is old news happening to new people. And so the new people keep asking the same question. And you know who are the loneliest ones in our world today? Either the high and mighty who have it all in fame and success and fortune, or the young who've enjoyed and indulged so early in life, they've come away empty-handed and they say, what have I got? What have I got? When I was a young speaker starting out living in Toronto, Canada, I was driving on the 401 highway in Toronto once. It was a cold, wintry, snowy night. And on the side of the highway, there was a boy just relatively swaggering on his legs. I thought, what is he doing on a snow-drifting night on the highway? He's going to get crushed. So I gradually, you've got to be careful on those icy roads. I pulled over on the side. And I waited till he came over. I said, are you okay? He said, can you take me home? I said, where are you going to? He told me where he was. I wasn't going that direction. I said, get in the car, I'll take you. His first name was Lauren. And I started to talk to him, and he looked like a man in deep trouble. I said, Lauren, I'd love to get together with you if you don't mind. Here's my phone number, here's my address, give me yours too. I'm leaving early tomorrow morning to Midwest Canada. I'll speak there when I come back. I'll get in touch with you. He said, you're a kind man. Thank you, thank you. I dropped him off at home. It was too late. By the time I came back a week later, he had burned himself to death. But not before he mailed a piece of poetry that he'd written and sent it to me. Lost in a world of darkness, without a guiding light, seeking a friend to help my struggling, failing plight. So all of you good people just go on passing by, leaving me with nothing but this lonely will to die. For somewhere in this lonely world of sorrow and of woe, There's a place for me to hide, but where I do not know. For no matter where I go, I never will escape the devil's reaching, clutching hands or the drink of fermented grape. So maybe out of my grief and anguish, some poor wandering boy will see and build his own life pure and good and free. He become a slave to his habits. I've met young men, and remember my colleagues who travel with me will tell you, whenever I tell them my story of trying to kill myself at the age of 17 and how I came to know Christ on a bed of suicide, there's always somebody in the audience who stands in line and tells me, you know what, I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with the same thing. The suicide rate in Belgium is so high right now that they are not calling it suicide anymore. They are calling it opting out of life. Opting out of life. Meaning, that hunger for meaning. Why am I here? What are the high seas about? Why am I out here in the first place? Moral reasoning demands we give an answer to life's essential worth and meaning. And I've said this in many, many places. You see, God gave Moses 613 laws. It's a lot of laws. But now we need 20,000 pages just for our healthcare laws. Why? Because we broke one. What was the one law? You're only given one prohibition when it all started. What was it? Don't play God. Don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because if you do that, you're going to die. And what does the tempter say? Oh, no, you're going to become a god. Do it, you're going to become God. We made quite a mess of this world playing God. Now you need 3 conditions just when you get onto a plane. Do not touch, tamper, disable, or destroy. 4 conditions. The smoke detector. Why don't they just say, don't mess with it? Why touch, tamper, disable, destroy? Because you see, you can go to court and say, yeah, I did destroy it, but I didn't tamper with it. And all the word games we start to play to give truth to him who loves it not is to only give him more multiplied reasons for misinterpretations, says George MacDonald. You can play games in a courtroom and abuse the law. So 613 laws, all being abused. And what does David do? He reduces them to 15. Isaiah to 11. Micah to 3. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before your God. Jesus was asked which is the greatest commandment. You know, he could have given you one, but he didn't. He said to love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2, says he, hang all of the laws and the prophets. Because of the first, the second follows. Without the first, the second would be with its feet firmly planted in midair. The vertical gives you the imperative for the horizontal. That's when you find meaning. When God says to you and to me that we are created in his image, which gives me moral reasoning and self-determination. The hunger for morality, the hunger for meaning. Thirdly and quickly, the hunger for hope, that life ought not to end with its 80 years and 10, or justice would have been prostituted and violated. There is an eternal judge. But I close with just the 4th. What is the greatest longing of your heart and mine? If you're dead honest, what is the greatest hunger and longing in your heart and mine? You know what it is? It's for the supreme ethic we call love. I want to give you a couple of illustrations. I grew up in India, and those of you who speak Hindi, hum dharti ke aadmi hain. I'm a person of the soil. And there's a Hindi song that says, na main bhagwan hu, na main shaitan hu, june duniya jo chahe, samjho main to insan hu. I'm not God. I'm not Satan. I'm merely a human being. Now, Indian movies are now being imitated by Hollywood. We had people stealing the Taj Mahal in the movies and returning it the next morning. Batman does the same thing. They've just borrowed all this stuff that Indian movies have been doing for years, but there's one thing Indian movies did which were quite fascinating. There was no kissing on the Indian screen. They just chased each other around during a song. And by the time he would catch up with her, the scene would change. There was a great Indian comedian by the name of I.S. Johar. He was asked, what is the difference between love on the Western screen and love on the Indian screen? He answered in one word: trees. You just chase each other around trees, and that's the love scene, But it's fascinating, in a culture in which you were never allowed to hold her hand or look more than 10 seconds, that we do so many movies on love. The movies on love if you understood the language, it's so beautiful the way they express themselves. Do you really see it in real life? My brother-in-law, Sundar Krishnan, is a Hindu convert, nuclear physicist turned pastor. Some of you may know his name. Brilliant expositor, married to my sister. His father was dying in his 85th year. And at the bed, he called his wife beside him. And in the Tamil term, he called her his sweetheart. And he said, I know this is the first time I have ever called you that. We long for it. The cultural constraints sometimes handcuff us. My little grandson, Jude, he's an amazing little boy. A corporal once said to Winston Churchill, sir, have I ever told you about my grandchildren? Churchill said no, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. So I don't want to tell you too much about grandchildren. But my grandson, Jude, he's quite a character. He's 5 years old. He sits around the table and he'll talk up a storm. One day he looked at me and he said, Papa, what is the meaning of sophomoric? I said, what? I said to my daughter, where does he pick up all these words? Sophomoric? I sounded sophomoric trying to define it for him. But here's the little guy. He thinks so deeply, he will shock you with the things he will say to you. When he was 3.5, my daughter Naomi is a wee little gal, beautiful gal. She'd lost her car keys and running around the house couldn't find it, slapped her forehead and said, I must be losing my mind. And Jude came and stood in front of her. He said, Mommy, whatever you do, please don't ever lose your heart because I'm in there. 3.5-year-old boy. Who taught him that? Who taught him that? 3.5 years old. My father-in-law died at the age of 85. He was an engineer with Shell all his life. One of the finest men I ever knew, Lindsay Reynolds. Had 4 daughters. The biggest grilling I ever took in my life was when I asked him for permission to marry his daughter. The questions he asked me, I thought, my goodness, I thought pre-med was tough. When he was diagnosed with a tumor in his kidney, from diagnosis to death, it was 4 months. He was 85, and he shriveled down to a bag of bones. Bruce was in the audience, knew him well. While he was wasting away, he couldn't speak anymore, and he was silent for days. I flew out to have some meetings. I told my wife, I said, honey, I'll be back in 3 days. I hope your dad can hang in there. He's really not saying anything anymore. So I flew back. When I arrived, she said, you missed it. He died just a couple hours ago. She said, Ravi, I've never seen anything like it in my life. He'd been silent, and his eyes opened. And he looked towards the ceiling, and he said this, that's amazing. That's just amazing. As he looked to the heavens. And then he looked at his wife of 60 plus years, and he said, Jean, I love you. And he was gone. He honored two of the greatest trusts, his love for God, whom he was going to see. For eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. And he honored his earthly commitment of loving his spouse. In this world without God, where are we going to find our definition for love if we don't go to agape? For God so loved the world that he gave. For God so loved the world that he sent his Son. But God commendeth his love towards us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. The love of Christ on the cross with the arms outstretched that says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, is the most unique concept of coherence of God's creation, the incarnation, the transformation, and the consummation that he brings in your life and mine. With that coherent worldview, we know why we're out on the high seas in the first place. And that helps us to keep from sinking and to keep from bumping into other ships. And it is Christ who commands me to even love those with whom I disagree. So I say to you, without God, moral reasoning, without God, meaning, without God, hope, without God, love. How do we define those four categories? Without God. Morality, hope, meaning, and love. With God, all of those are pregnant with meaning and give you the fulfillment for why we are out here in the first place. We will be delighted to answer your questions. Mark and I have agreed he'll take all the tough ones, I'll take the simple ones. So God bless you. Go ahead.
Goodness me. If I could have got any closer to the edge of my seat, I would have fallen on my knees on the floor. That was fabulous. Thank you so much. Being in the presence of wisdom is an awesome thing. Graciously, Ravi has agreed to answer questions, and the way that's going to work is simply Rodney is going to greet you at the microphone stand, and he will listen to your question, then we'll direct the questions to Ravi or to Mark. At the conclusion, and we're doing questions for about 30 minutes, at the conclusion there will be some ministry time, and there will be people who just love to engage with you about the mysteries of the gospel and to talk about the love of Jesus. So if you've got questions in your mind, there will be people here specifically to help you do that. So if you have questions, I'd like you to come down to the front and see Rodney. He will help to moderate that. What I'd like you to do, if possible, is to avoid questions like, is Donald Trump a man of God or not? Let's stick to the subject at hand, if we may. I'm sure there are not too many questions which will vex our guest. And if you've seen any of his work on podcasts or listened to him on the radio, you know that he is well considered in his answers, and they are beautiful. So we are on.
Hi there. First of all, thank you very much for that. It was an honour to be here and hear you. I have a question about strategy for apologetics and evangelism going forward. What should the loving Christian response be to an increasingly existential, pluralistic world that views our loving message as irrelevant and hateful?
I'll be glad to talk about it as a calling, and I'll let Mark talk about it as living it out, because he's obviously done it so well, and both of those aspects are within your orb of questioning there. When you go into it in the way, say, our team does, and we've got nearly 50 of them, as we were told earlier, in 15 countries on every continent. If you're doing anything as a calling and as a profession, you have to put in the hard work. There is no doubt about it. In fact, most of our younger ones, and Rodney was very kind in saying they were as good as what I represented, that was very kindly stated, they're better. They are better. They are doing things at their younger age that I was never able to do. And they have caught on so well what the DNA is of 1 Peter 3:15 and 16, to always be prepared to give a reason for the hope and an answer to one who asks of you, and to do that with gentleness and respect. We are living in a world of a graduate level skepticism, all right? And you cannot set a tepid Christianity beside a scorching paganism. You have to do your homework. You have to study hard. Most of the younger ones are having done for them what I wish somebody could have done for me when I was younger. We are getting them all the way through their PhDs at very prestigious universities. Why? Because it opens a lot of doors for them, and they need to get into the academic arena. But the most important thing is that they don't get intoxicated with the letters against their name, but that they have a humble heart and a servant spirit. When Jesus was asked to describe the kingdom, he didn't take a scholar, he took a child and said, if you don't become like one of these, neither will you enter into the kingdom. So humility with capacity to learn and build and understand. So professionally, our pastors are going to need more and more rigorous training, and it's hard. Being a pastor is one of the most difficult things in the world, or an educator, wherever you are. So in a calling, go the distance. Do your best. Work hard. That is only one level. Not every one of us is called to do that. And so I'll let Mark deal with how you deal with this in a day-to-day level, and I'm sure he has given that a lot of thought too.
I think it's a great question. Apologetics is often seen as argumentation, and New Zealanders don't like conflict. I've been here 14 years, and I've learned the hard way that's true at times. But they do enjoy conversation, and I think conversational apologetics, where you're relaxed, is important, and especially in a New Zealand context. You know, there's a guy called Greg Kukel who does good stuff, and he talks about knowledge, character, and wisdom. You do need a bit of knowledge, but you don't need to know everything. In fact, the best knowledge sometimes is having good questions, and I find that being on boards of organizations. You know, bad directors spout what they know rather than ask good questions of the executive, because good questions make people think. So some of the best thing you can do in conversation is just ask good questions. Well, why would you believe that? You know, what's your reasons for that? Rather than feel you've got to have all the answers. Character, you know, again, is the humility to not feel that pressure. You've got to be right, etc. Character is actually, you know, you can't profess to be one thing and then be this screaming, nasty person, because people are not going to listen to you either in conversation. And the wisdom is, you know, I think wisdom is constantly both hands, and I think the message in this is truth and love. Truth and love. Your motive is not to be right and win arguments. Your motive is out of love, wanting to bring truth into a situation. And there's two equal and opposite errors, I think, in the public square, and that is the error of privatizing your faith, you know, and being almost frightened to even mention it. And the other error is to be the weird Christian in the workplace who's just screaming at people. You know, in the middle, you can have truth and love. So putting those together, you know, knowledge, wisdom, and character, I think, is to think through. You do have to do some hard work, but don't be intimidated. And often, you know, the arguments and the underlying principles on so many worldviews are not anything to be scared of. And have that confidence to just ask questions, because when you just ask a few questions, the walls often come tumbling down.
Can I underscore one thing that Mark just said there, because it was a very important point he made. Questioning your questioner does two things. It opens them up within their own assumptions, and it determines the entry point of the discussion. And I always tell my team, remember that behind every question is a questioner. So you're not there. My mother used to say, once you've cut off a person's nose, there's no point in giving them a rose to smell. You know, you're not there to decimate the person. You're there to really win them. And Jesus always questioned his questioner. Good master, what should I do to attain eternal life? You and I would have had the answer in 4 points. Jesus said to him, why are you calling me good? There's none good but God. So are you calling me God? And if you're calling me God, will you listen to me? Or if you're not calling me God, are you telling me you can be good without God? See, he's immediately opened the person up within their own assumptions. So learn to ask good questions and respect the questioner. That's very, very key. Yeah.
Mugridge is to Zacharias what Zacharias is to me, so it's an honor to be here, sir. I work for a senior member of government and as an advisor, and I'm just wondering, with regards to the conversation today, how do you engage with ethics and morality when you disagree with policy and you need to do a good job, you need to support your boss, but it's foundational, it's nation-changing.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. My condolences to you. That's very, very tough. That's very, very tough. The thing is this, I put it this way, if you don't mind me standing, it's easier on my back. We think, in America, for example, I hear this again and again and again, we are a culture of laws. We're a country of laws. We are built upon laws. So they keep talking about laws as the root from which this tree called America sprung. The trunk is politics. Law builds that trunk up, and the branches are culture. Okay? Law, politics, culture. And when I speak to them in the political arena, I ask them, what holds the roots? The roots don't hold themselves. They need a strong moral soil that holds the roots. The challenge in politics today is such a difficult one because of a pluralistic culture. When I spoke to the African presidents in Maputo, Mozambique,
I'm from Mozambique.
are you really? Well, the only time I'd been there, and President Obasanjo of Nigeria had hosted it. We had Kofi Annan there at the table, and right in front of me was Muammar Gaddafi some years ago, and they asked me to speak on finding answers in that continent. And one of the presidents, whom I won't name, was walking back with me after I finished. He said, Mr. Zacharias, our cumulative wisdom is unable to meet the daunting challenges of our time. Our cumulative wisdom is unable to meet the daunting challenges of our time. So my answer to you is this: you will never win it all, but you must try to go for the deepest convictions that you carry to help change society. And the deepest conviction has to be answered with one question: does essence define existence, or does existence define essence? The existentialist said, existence defines essence, and we saw what happened to the existentialistic world. But when you go to essential ethics, and who you are should determine how you live, build that conviction within your boss's heart, gently, line upon line, precept upon precept, and let him watch your life. Even if he doesn't take everything you say, the day you come to part ways, he will probably look at you and say, I respect you for the man you are and what you have actually stood for. And so I start off with this. We will never change our world with politics. Politicians will come and go. But one head of police, I want to be careful here, in one of the countries not far from here, was speaking to me when I was speaking to civic leaders. He was sitting 2 away from me at the table. He said, Mr. Zacharias, I have 18,000 law enforcement men and women working under me. He said, next weekend is Father's Day. He said, in one section of our city, that is the most dreaded day of the year for the young people, because 90% of those young people in that area of the city don't know who their father is. If we don't rebuild our homes and our families, there's no hope for the future. We have to start with raising our young and building our young. Voice your opinion, give it, even if you disagree. He will see it in your life. My dad was a politician. And the change in his life that came later in life, I would never have believed would have been the change that came upon him. It will happen, and ironically, I have seen it happen in many places We think it's the pharaohs and the monarchs, but there's the Daniels and the Nehemiahs and the Josephs and the Moses that steer the ship ultimately that
goes. Fabulous. Goodness me. Thanks, Rodney.
It's really great to hear you guys tonight. Just a very quick statistic. They say that if a child has been brought up in a Christian home and gone to church most of their life, by the time they reach 16, they've had more than 3,500 to 4,000 hours at church activities. I go around speaking to youth groups and I play the advocate of an atheist and ask them to push back on me. Most youth groups, the young people there will stare at me with a blank stare. My question is this, going on from what Mark said before. How do we reach this next generation with apologetics? I believe it personally has got to start in the home, but I see increasingly youth struggling under the secular worldview and being scared to stick up for their faith. And I don't want to turn them into, fire-breathing apologetics. And like you say, Ravi, we don't want to, cut off their nose and give them a rose to smell. But how do we give them that love for the lost and that knowledge to push back on this ever-increasing secular worldview? Thank you.
Look, there's no easy solution, and everyone can do their bit, and it's not the pastor's job alone. Ministry, mission, church, they're words that get distorted, and we start to think about them as narrow about certain individuals. We're the church. The person who said to me when I went to work at the warehouse and stopped being an associate pastor in a church said, "Why did you leave the ministry?" I just said, "What? You serious?" So we've all got a role. So everyone needs to do their bit as the people of God in your church, in your place. And then the question is, what's there to support and equip you? That's why Think It Matters I support. There's so many resources now. Cold Kids Christianity for Kids with J. Warner Wallace has started to produce really good stuff for kids, for example. It's all available online. You can Google it. It's just all available. So I think inviting people to speak, connecting with Rodney, I think the more people who do their bit, and also pushing back on the distorted view of what apologetics is. I think a lot of people are frightened of apologetics because they think it's about arguing with atheists. It's all about complicated science stuff. And I think what I feel called to is more, it's simple really. What is reality and how do we know it? And then putting that into simple language is not there to look clever. And so everyone doing their bit will gradually move the dial. And that may not be motivational, but I think that's how things happen. So Rodney's been, with Think It Matters, has grown stuff. Getting Ravi here. Confident Christianity has grown over the last few years. I'm actually delivering a course at Carey Theological College, which will be part of the theology degree in apologetics for the first time this year. So it will gradually grow. But we need to make sure it doesn't become the reason some pastors have become afraid of apologetics. When somebody turns up, tries to show they're intellectually superior, tries to be clever, have all the answers, and has no grace and no love. We've got to have both together. And by doing that, the thirst for truth, people are seeing this whole experiential, young kids aren't interested in this, is utter nonsense. They're deeply interested in it. They're deeply interested in the questions of meaning, as Ravi said, the questions of purpose, the questions of how to live. And so we've just got to work out how to do that. And the more people who do it, get the conversation going, use the resources that are there, the more we will shift the dial.
Great.
Can I just add to that, if I may? I've said to some people recently that my daughter recently turned 4,500 days old. And I think one of the issues that we face on this earth is that we measure in such odd ways. And, I want to encourage parents because in those 4,500 days, it's 4,500 opportunities to tell her how wonderful and how unique and beautiful she is. And to kiss her goodnight 4,500 times. And to greet her in the morning 4,500 times. And I've got to pay $20 for mentioning her tonight. But not 4,500 times, $20. But the more that we can tell our kids the things, because what I'm observing working in the media is the utter influx and overwhelming information coming at them that's telling them anti-Christian messages, telling them things which are just lies. And, it's not surprising to me that the rise of technology and the rise of disbelief are hand in hand. And I could quote you studies that talk about the use of technology causing aggression, depression and psychosis in children. In fact, I interviewed a guy called Dr. Nicholas Kadaris out of Long Island, New York, who's an addiction specialist. He said it's easier to get people off meth than it is to get them off devices. There's a reason why devices are so popular, and it's killing conversation, it's killing relationship. But be encouraged, parents, because the more we tell them the truth, the more that will permeate who they are. Just keep telling them, and and I keep telling my daughter, she's unique, she's wonderful, she's creative. She's the image bearer, she's image Dei, she carries the image of God.
Can I just add one thing? I'm an idealistic realist, I'm an optimistic pessimist. There's this two equal and opposite errors again. There's this, the world's going all bad, everything's wrong, etc. When we got to get used to the fact we're not in charge anymore. Whoopsie-doo. The Israelites were 400 years in Egypt, so let's get a God perspective for that. Relax a bit, but then do our best. It's those tensions together that, we're not called to be successful, we're not called to win, we're called to be faithful. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And so that brings a peace. It's not about our success, it's not about our performance, but it calls us to action. And, things might get a lot worse before they get better. That's irrelevant. God's in charge. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got time for I think just one more question.
Yeah, my question for the panel is, political correctness has overtaken the world big time. A yes is not a yes anymore, and a no is not a no. And I have always stand up for what is right based on biblical principle, and I get funny looks all around. Just to give you an example, I turned up one morning at my organization where I do some voluntary work, and there was this huge mirror standing in front of my desk. So I guess I got the message. So I wrote a note by Mac Davis. The song goes like this: "Oh Lord, it's hard to be humble. The more I look in the mirror, the better I think I am." So, but we are trying the best as I can. Would you like to comment on this political correctness? It just seems to erode our values and our morals, maybe.
Yeah. I appreciate what you're saying. Actually, the erosion of values is what produced political correctness. They had to hang the values somewhere. And once they took it away from the transcendent creator, we had to find some place to plant it. And strangely, we parked it in a place, in a profession that we trust the least. Can you imagine calling it politically correct? And if you ask an average person, do you have a great deal of confidence in politics? No. Then why do you call it politically correct? You see, it's the fact that we always use words that we manipulate to suit ourselves. Tolerance, for example. What that really means is, if you don't accept what I believe, you are intolerant. I don't have to accept what you believe. So I always say this when people ask me, and we'll close with this, and I'll even give a challenge after that. See, when we talk about ethics and we talk about culture, Paul Tillich, the famed German theologian, said, religion is the essence of culture, and culture is the dress of religion. Religion is the essence of culture, culture is the dress of religion. So when I'm asked a thorny social question, I always respond to them by saying something like this. I say, I will answer your question, but it could be a trick question you're asking me to try and finish me off. I say, so what I'm asking you is this: what culture do we live in now? There are three types of culture with belief that works itself into ethics: theonomous, heteronymous, autonomous. Theonomous means theos, nomos, God, law. that God's law is in the heart of people, and we live that out. So we call that a theonomous culture. There are very few theonomous cultures now. There are theocratic cultures which dictate for the masses, but theonomous meaning we have the law of God so in our heart that we naturally think in those terms. Once upon a time, we called that natural law. Americans, once upon a time, believed in natural law. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that we are all created equal, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights. There was natural law that was self-evident, but they don't believe that anymore. So we're not theonomous culture in the West. So what is the next? Heteronomous, where a handful at the top dictated for the masses below. Heteronomy, heteros meaning another, nomos meaning law. Another group dictates it for you. In religious terms, Islam is a heteronomous culture. The mullahs and the sheikhs and all of them dictate it for the masses. In political terms, communism is a heteronomous culture. The few at the top dictate it for the masses below. The West does not go in that route, as generally speaking here. So we are not theonomous, we are not heteronomous. What then is the third option? It's autonomous. Autos meaning self, nomos meaning law. So I'll always say to the questioner, are we an autonomous culture? He would say, yes. I say, my question to you is this. If I answer your question, will you give me the privilege of autonomy? Or will you suddenly switch to heteronomy and start condemning me that I'm not in agreement with the view that you hold?
My question.
And so what I say to you is that political correctness and heteronomy has taken over. And the reason is because we do not ever believe anymore that we are created in God's image and endowed by our Creator with rights. So the reality in the West with political correctness is hanging on to a breaking branch because we have come severed from the roots.
Okay.
We have time for one more.
That's fine. So facts doesn't matter anymore?
No, facts are a good question. I don't want to get branched off. If you know that Oxford Dictionary's new word for the 2016, post-truth? Post-truth. That facts don't matter anymore. That's exactly what they say. Now the question is, if this is a post-truth culture and facts don't matter, is the fact that this is called a post-truth culture true? So you can't do away with truth ultimately, but that's three things, by the way, on that. Post-truth means three things. Facts don't matter, my feelings do. Number two, it says that you really can distort it in any way you want, so long as you have a lofty end in mind. And so the third reality is, hence we produce the lie stuck like a fishbone in the throat of the microphone. Whether it's the media or anywhere else, it doesn't matter whether what they're saying is true or not. They want to generate a feeling within you. And so with truth being dead, we have to find what is the most appealing lie by which to live. Okay, thank you.
All right, well, we will take one more question. Thank you.
Thank you all for speaking tonight. I'll cherish what you've had to say tonight. It's a simple question, really, but kind of a broad one. Given the ideological context of the 21st century, what does evangelism need to look like for Christians? That's my question. Thank you.
I'll do a short answer and then I'll leave you to do the hard bit. Look, I think it's truth and love. You come back to that. It's sort of see, I like to take complex and make it simple. Yeah, I like to take complex things and try and make it simple. And obviously sometimes I think we overcomplicate stuff. Love God, love others. You know, the greatest commandment. Truth and love. So we've got to get equipped. You know, the previous question, what have we done? We've not been smart enough. You know, I think. You know, we do have to get equipped, we do have to get knowledge, we do have to build character, we do have to be wise when to speak and when to not to speak. And when I said we've got to be used to being in charge, our posture often is one of power and dominance. I don't think it's a bad thing for us to take a posture that's not in that position. Yeah? And the early church wasn't in that position, yeah, as well. So for me, you know, I'm not a great evangelist, or I don't claim to be that, but in your place where you are, growing in Christ, in knowledge, wisdom, and character, and being in that place, neither ashamed of your faith, nor actually not loving others, just wanting to be right, you know. The starting point is to have move to a position not of judging others, that knowing, understanding, appreciating, then you can evaluate and talk into that, and they'll listen, you know, generally. So the more people we can build and grow into those positions where they seem to have wisdom, they ask good questions, they perhaps, you know, when somebody says, what do you think about homosexuality? What do you think about X? Well, the first you ask the question, are you a tolerant person before I answer that? You know, rather than diving in, you know, to what you might think or not. Being smart, equipping yourself, and I think is the key thing, you know, and celebrating their diversity in that. You've got passions that God has put on your heart. Actually, the passion for apologetics is quite a small minority. I actually think that's probably a reason. Other people are passionate about music, other people are passionate about the arts, other people are passionate about preaching. But don't be cowed by your passion. God's put it there for a reason. So develop it and use it. Use that gift in honor of God for the love of others.
Let me add a footnote to that. See, changing a person's heart is God's prerogative, not mine. Apologetics is the seasoning, it's not the main course. The main course of the gospel. All right, you just sprinkle the seasoning and you do that. You really don't argue a person into the kingdom. If you do, somebody else will argue them out of it. Okay, you really want that change of heart to take place by the Holy Spirit, and that's what God does best. He changes hearts the way you and I can't. The second thing I want to say to you is, evangelism took a beating from the 1970s and 80s onward. Why? Because it became a commercialized endeavor on television. And people were not slow to see the big money, the big machines, all the artificiality of it all. And skeptics would look at it and say, this is a mockery. I can't really take this seriously. And as a result, we've lost a lot of ground in the last 30 to 40 years. People take people seriously when they see there's a genuineness. It's fascinating. One of the most poignant writers from the other side of the fence is Matthew Paris in England. And Matthew Paris has an article that he wrote some time ago. Shockingly, he has an alternative lifestyle and he's an atheist. But he went to Africa and he saw a small group of young guys and girls who are ministering to people. And he said, I've come away from there shaken in my own atheism and wondering how I can even now write what I'm going to write. He said, my world is in a different world. But he said, I watched them and I found out something. I've got that article right on my phone. It's a powerful article. He said, if Africa is going to change, it is going to take evangelism, he said. Otherwise, you end up with a blend of the big man and the Nike and the machete all put together. He said, the change of heart is needed, and I am coming away convinced that evangelism is an indispensable component in reaching that continent. The only one thing I disagree with him on, it's not just Africa, it's the whole world. You need evangelism with genuineness and with a true spirit of authenticity. Let me give you a personal illustration, and with that, I'll bring my closing statement. When I moved to Canada in '66, I was 20 years old. There were 500 Indians in Toronto. If you saw an Indian, you crossed the street and asked him if you had time for a cup of tea. You know, if you did that today, you will never get anywhere, because Toronto alone has 500,000 Indians, okay? So let me put that in context. So I'm talking about the 70s when I started, and I was invited to have dinner at a person's place because they knew an Indian. And that's the way it goes, you know. Do you know a friend of mine in India? His name is Mr. Singh. And that's the way it was at that time, believe me. So I was invited, and I thought to myself, I think I'm being set up. this guy is not looking forward to talking to me. And he sat across the room like this and kept giving me the eye like I'm a betrayer. I'll take you on kind of thing. I never said a thing about my faith. And they kept saying, you know, he's a Christian, he's speaking at our church now and all of that. And I never bit. I just said, if you're free, we'd love to have you. You're a teacher. I'm talking about how Christ changed my life. If you're free one of these evenings, please come. And I prayed at the table before the meal, and I prayed at the end of the evening. Many years went by, and I get a call in Toronto. He said, do you remember me? And he gave me his name. I met you in New Brunswick. I said, I remember you well. He said, would you please come and pay me a visit? I'm at the Princess Margaret Hospital here in Toronto. As soon as he said that, I knew that was a hospital for cancer. I said, I'll be there. Got into my car and went. He gave me his room number, and I walked into that room, looked at him, and I walked away because it was somebody else. And he called out, Ravi. I opened the door again. I didn't recognize him. He was shrunken to a skeleton. He said, sit on my bed. I want to talk to you. He said, I have become a follower of Jesus Christ, but I'm not going to live beyond this week. I just wanted to thank you for not coming down hard on me many, many years ago and just being who you were with grace and kindness. And I started to cry. I wasn't even that sure all that happened. What meant a lot to him was that I hadn't gone for the jugular, that I didn't grab him by the throat. I was just kind and gracious to him and told him what I believed, and he was welcome to the meetings. He was gone by the end of the week. Never judge the harvest immediately. Sometimes it could be years in the making, and you will never know what made an impact upon the person. But evangelism is going to take on tough hurdles. However, the tough ones, when they are reached, they are the ones who become the Saul to Paul. They are the ones who go into the marketplace unashamedly. So thank you, and be faithful to wherever God has placed you. I'd like to close with a closing statement, but that is this. You know, it's a long distance to come here. It takes us a long while to get here. People ask us, why do you go? I've got a family, I've got grandkids, and I miss them a lot. I really do. I wish so much this was not my calling. I've done it now for over 4 decades. I am more firmly convinced than ever that outside of Jesus Christ, there are no answers to your life. And outside of Jesus Christ, there is no hope for our country, for the future. There will be no possibility of ethics. It'll become a dangerously desperate world. Acharya Vinoba Bhave, a famous Indian thinker, said, in the pre-modern world, violence would be relative. In the modern world, violence would become an absolute. He was right. Violence has become an absolute in our times. So if you don't know Christ, I'm going to say this to you. Will you honestly take the Gospel of John and just read it through, a chapter or 2 at a time, and ask God to speak to you? And if you have wandered away from Him, get right. Get right. Give your life back to Him. There's nothing out there. It'll leave you emptier than when you started. Only in Christ is the perpetual novelty. My colleague here, Sanj Kalra, was a salesman producing tens of millions of dollars for a successful medical device company. He lived for pleasure and every indulgence you can think of till it broke him, nearly broke his marriage, nearly broke his family. He's sitting here with his daughter here tonight, one of his 2 girls. He was on a suicide drive to kill himself. And he drove into the church to talk to the pastor and literally got on his knees and grabbed the pastor's legs and said, I'm not getting out of here till you help me. God transformed him. He gave up his lucrative business career, has joined our team, and his testimony is riveting in telling you how Christ transforms a derelict person and rebuilds the marriage and rebuilds the home and helps you win your very kids to the Lord because of the shining difference they have seen in His life. If you don't know Christ, put your life into His hands tonight. If you do know him but have walked away from him, pray the prayer of repentance. This is a beautiful crowd. We are honored that you've come here to give us a hearing. We are truly honored. When I saw the crowd outside, my heart sank. I said, what am I going to say? Why are they here? I hope you are here for just one thing, to see what God has to say to you. And if you will just say, God, speak to me, I promise you, if you genuinely mean it, he will make your life more beautiful than you ever imagined. I'm not saying pain-free, I'm not saying trouble-free, but he will build within you the beauty and the purpose for which he created you. And there's only one like you. Nobody else can replicate you. Ask him to do the miracle in your heart. And I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and pray with me now. Father, you are here. We know that. You have been here. Thank you for the leadership that had faith and trust to even call such a meeting as this. Thank you for Mark's testimony tonight, proven in the field of a steep climb, but staying faithful to reach the peak. Thank you for the encouragement that these people have been to both of us and to John here as he has spoken and shared, that they're listening with respect. Lord, we live here today in this beautiful country. What spectacular, breathtaking beauty. And Lord, I'm so grateful that there are guardians as we enter this country to try to protect that beauty. And yet there is a plundering that's going on morally and spiritually, and nobody knows what to do about that. I pray for New Zealand, pray for its people. Tonight in this audience, Lord, will you not rescue those who really need you? And ladies and gentlemen, while our heads are bowed in prayer, I would love to pray for you. If you're willing to say, Ravi, I'm willing to give a go at this with a sincere heart. I need Christ. Or you're willing to say, I really am supposed to know him, but I'm not living like that at all. I need to return. If God has spoken to you and you're responding to his wooing and his call, will you just slip your hand up and put it down? I'd love to pray for you as we close. God bless you, sir, right in the front. Yes, yes. Hands here at the ground level. God bless you at the back. Back there again. At the back, in the middle. Looking to my right. Yes, thank you. Other hands here looking at the ground level. Especially if you've never really trusted him, but tonight you want to make that turn. Would you do it? And yet by that simple upraised hand, you again say, please pray for me, Ravi. I want to make this turn. I've been running long enough. Thank you, ma'am. God bless you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Anyone else at the ground level on my left? Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you. Upstairs. Just a quick look upstairs in the balcony. Yes, on my left, extreme left there. 3 or 4 hands, and yes, looking to my left there. And as I'm surveying this upstairs to the right in the balcony, just hold it up high so I can see it. Yes, yes, thank you. Yes, sir, thank you so much. Thank you. I see a couple of hands there and right at the back. God bless you. How beautiful the sight of thee must be. Thy endless wisdom, boundless love, and awesome purity. Prostrate before thy throne to lie and gaze on thee. Lord Jesus, forgive us if we repeat your sacred name 1,000 times a day to tell you we love you. Father, these hands that have gone up, you know the hearts, you know the hunger, you know the pain. I pray that these outstretched hands will signify an outstretched will, calling upon you, and you have said, call upon me and I will answer you. and you are faithful and just to forgive us our sins when we confess them. We come before you tonight on behalf of the people who have just taken that decision. You know what that decision is. Make it real, and what we've heard tonight to be truly true, in keeping with reality. Transform the hearts. Let it be a new beginning. And if people leave here without knowing you but need to know you, follow them like the hound of heaven. And even by their bedside, speak to them so that that'll be corrected. Let your benediction rest upon all of us. Thank you for giving us such a lovely evening and a delightful theme to talk about what is true, good, and beautiful. You, Lord Jesus, embody that in fullness. We ask your benediction and pray your presence to go with us. In Jesus' name, amen. I'll tell John to deal. If you can give him instructions on what to do.
Due to Ravi's voice and needing to rest it, he's not going to stay with us for any longer, but we do have a team of people that would love to talk to you, people who are passionate about the gospel of Jesus Christ and would love to connect with you. If you've got questions that you'd like answered, perhaps you're one of the people that raised their hands tonight. There are people who would love to talk with you, and they're going to be down the front. They'll be identified as a ministry team with some red badges on. Folks, I just want to thank the people watching the two different campuses at Belmont and in Green Lane. Really appreciate you being with us tonight. And those watching online, there were hundreds and hundreds of people watching us live tonight online. That concludes the formal part of our evening. All that's left to say is, once again, thank you so much to Ravi Zacharias and to Mark Powell. And again, a big, just a thank you to the team here at Harbourside for their graciousness and for putting on the staff to do this event this evening. Thank you so much. Please go to the website, Thinking Matters.